What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In this video today, we're going to take a look at Amazon S3 and how to use it in Python. Now, I wouldn't go as far as to call this video a crash course. It's going to be way too basic for it to be a crash course. There's much more that we can cover, but I would call it a quick introduction into Amazon S3. Maybe this is the first time you're using any AWS service. Maybe you just want to know what it is and how to use it, and also how to use it in Python. So this video today will be a very brief introduction into Amazon S3 with a focus on using it in Python. So let us get right into it. Alright, now we're going to take a look at Amazon S3 in this video today. As I already mentioned in the introduction, this is not going to be a full crash course. It's not going to be a full tutorial. It's more like a high-level, basic and quick introduction into Amazon S3 with a focus of using it in Python, using the Boto 3 package. But we're also going to cover S3 in general. So I'm going to start with the very basics. What is S3? Why should we use it? When should we use it? We're going to talk about basic concepts like buckets and objects. Then we're going to move on to Python. And in the end, we're also going to take a look at an example Flask application where we use S3 to just manage files. Now, this video is the perfect starting point for anyone who doesn't know what S3 is. If you want to get started with the service, if you want to get started with AWS in general and you don't know anything about it, that is a very good starting point. But we're not going to cover much beyond that. And the reason I'm structuring the video like this is because a lot of people are very confused when they get into this whole cloud computing world, be it in GCP or be it in AWS. You get started, you see all these services, and then you have so many configuration options, so many things that you can choose from, and it's oftentimes quite overwhelming and confusing. So what I want to do in this video is I really want to focus on the very, very basics, like how can we create a bucket, how can we upload objects, how can we enable versioning and work with that, how can we download objects, how can we empty buckets, delete objects, how can we delete buckets, and that's basically it. I just want to show you the very basics, and then you can take it from there and go to a more advanced tutorial or to the documentation or to whatever you want to do. And this is something I want to do in general with AWS services because every service has so many features and you can cover it for hours, but I want to just break it down to the very essentials. And if you guys like this video, I'm also going to do similar videos for other services like Lambda functions and so on. So I really want to distill it down to the essentials. I really want to show you this is what the service is for. This is how you can use the basic functionality. This is how you can use it in Python. And now go and learn about all the details and all the extra things that you can learn about. So let us get started with Amazon S3. This is the website, aws.amazon.com/S3. Here you get to the product page, and here you can read about the service. So what is it for? What is it in general? What are the benefits? What is the pricing? What are some use cases? You can read about this if you want to. To summarize it briefly, it's a storage service. You can use it to store files in the cloud, to manage files in the cloud, and you have some pretty advanced features. You have stuff that is important for meeting regulatory requirements, for compliance stuff, and so on. But the very basic idea is you can store files in the cloud. You can upload objects, which are files essentially. You can download objects. And you can do versioning and stuff like that. It's basically managing stuff, managing objects and files in the cloud. That's the basic idea. And you do that using so-called buckets. Buckets are essentially just containers for objects. Objects, as I mentioned, are files, and you basically have a naming structure where you can have sort of folders. I mean, the structure of these buckets is actually flat, so you don't really have a hierarchy with folders, but based on the name, based on the slashes, you can have basically folders by just using prefixes and so on. But that is the basic idea of Amazon S3. You have this storage service. This is actually what the name stands for. Simple storage service, 3 times the S, S3. That is what this is about. And what we're going to do today is we're going to learn how to use it. And the first step for that is you want to log into your console. So this means you're going to have to create an AWS account if you don't have one. And if you have one, you just have to sign in. So in my case, I'm signed in. Then you can search up here in the search bar for S3, and you're going to get to the service. Now, I'm not going to cover in this video today how to set up the payment method in your account. This is a general thing that you need to do in AWS. I'm sure you can figure it out, but you need to have payment available, or you need to have a payment method available so that you can use S3, because even though there's a free tier, in AWS, you have to have a payment method, otherwise you cannot really use stuff. So this is Amazon S3. I can click now here on Create Bucket, and this is going to allow me to already create a simple bucket. So let's say I'm going to call this Neural 9 tutorial. bucket. I hope this name is not taken. This has to be a globally unique name, so nobody is allowed to have this name. I hope no one has neural 9 tutorial bucket. You can also choose a region, so an AWS region. In my case here now, I'm using Europe Central 1, which is Frankfurt and Germany. You can use US, Asia, Canada, different Europe servers, South America, whatever you want. Sometimes for regulatory purposes, it makes sense to have a server in a specific region. For example, if you have a European company, you're based in Europe, you might have certain EU regulations that you need to follow when it comes to your storage. And in this case, it makes more sense to have a server in Europe, in the EU, and not in the US, for example, or in Asia. So we're not going to copy any settings from an existing bucket. We're not going to use access control lists, so we're going to keep this disabled. We're going to also block all public access, so we're only going to be able to use our buckets ourselves, so we're not going to share it with anyone. We're not going to make it public. We are going to enable bucket versioning. You don't have to do it here. We can also do that in Python, or we can do that later on as well. So maybe actually let's click here on disable and then enable it later on to see how this is done. And versioning basically means if I upload the same file, so the same file name, it's going to keep different versions. So if I have a file1.txt and it says hello world, and then I have hello world again, then it's going to keep two versions, one with hello world and with hello world again. So that's the basic idea. We have different versions. It's a little bit like a Git repository where you have different versions depending on the commit. And we're going to keep it disabled, but then we're going to enable it to see how it works. We're not going to use any tags. We're going to use the default encryption here. And we're not really going to change anything about the advanced settings either. So very simple, choose a name, leave everything as it is, and then just click on create bucket. Now my camera is hiding the button, but there was a button that says create bucket. And then we have this bucket here. And what I can do now is I can upload files. So I can add files to the bucket. Now for this, let me go to my current working directory. And here I'm going to just create a text file. Let's call it file1.txt. I'm going to say hello world. And then maybe let's create a second file where I'm going to say this is another file. So I can then close this. I can go to upload. And here now I have to add files. So I click upload and then add files. Then I navigate to my current directory. And here I have my two files. So I can select them, open them, and then I can just upload. So this is uploading them to my bucket. Now I can go back to my bucket. You can see we have the two files here. I can also click on the file. I have a bunch of metadata here. I also have a link to the object, but in this case, I'm not going to be able to download it because the access is denied. I cannot just use the link here since this is blocking all public access. But I can basically just go and download the file by using this button here. So I can click on download and store it here now as, I don't know, file downloaded txt. I downloaded file 1, so the hello world file. Let's go to my directory again, and then let's cat file downloaded, and you're going to see hello world. Now, versioning is not enabled, so this is not going to really do anything now if I upload the same file again. But if I have versioning enabled, I'm going to be able to upload file1.txt with a different content, and it's going to just add a version to file1.txt instead of replacing it. We're going to take a look at that in a second. But that is basically what you can do here in this dashboard, in this console. You can just create the buckets, you can add files, you can of course also delete files, so I can mark them, I can click on delete, then I can also go to the bucket itself and I can say empty to remove all the content, and then I can say delete. Now I'm not able to delete a bucket if the bucket is not empty, so the bucket must be empty before I can delete it. That's important, but we're not going to do this now here in the interface. We're going to already move on to the command line into Python. Now for the next step, we're going to need credentials so that we can authenticate ourselves with AWS. For this, what you need to do is you need to go to your username in the top right. You want to click on security credentials. And now I'm going to censor out a lot here, but what you basically need to do is you need to go to access keys. You need to go to create access key. And then you're going to get an access key ID and also a secret. You need to store both somewhere in a file or in your clipboard, whatever. We're going to need it in a second. And then we're going to move on with the AWS CLI. So we're going to use the command line interface to authenticate ourselves and to be able to work with AWS. And the Python package Bodo3 is automatically going to recognize that we're authenticated and it's going to use the account that we associate with the AWS CLI. So you want to go to this page. You're going to find it in the description down below, aws.amazon.com/CLI. Here you want to click on Getting Started with the AWS CLI. This is going to get you to this page here. And then it says complete all prerequisites. Basically, you just need the credentials that I just talked about. And then you want to go to installing or updating to the latest version of the AWS CLI. So this is going to take you to that page. This is what I mean. It's already quite confusing. You have to click link after link just to get some basic stuff done. But you basically go to this. You can then go to your operating system down here, in my case, Linux. And you just have to follow the instructions for the installation. So on Linux, we basically just have to run this. At least on my system, I had to run this. And this just installs AWS onto your system. So you do the curl command, the unzip command, and then the install using sudo. And once you have that, you should be able to run AWS. So AWS should open the tool, or should run the tool. You should see something like this. And this is exactly what we need. Once you have done that, you can move to a directory where you want to be coding. You have to run AWS configure. Now, I already ran this, but AWS configure is going to ask you for the access key ID. It's going to ask you for the secret, and also I think for location. Just make sure you provide the correct ID, the correct secret, and whatever you want else as the settings. And then you're good to go, and you can use the Python package. Now, in order to use the Python package, we're going to run pip or pip3 install boto3, and then in square brackets CRT to use the AWS authentication. So we're going to put this in quotation marks, and that is going to install the package, in my case already installed. And then we can get started with a basic Python script. For this, I'm going to move this to my other screen, and we're going to just call this main.py, and here we're going to go through some examples. So we're going to say import os, import boto3, and we can start by creating a simple S3 client. So I'm going to say S3 client is equal to boto3 client, and then S3 as a parameter, as a string parameter. Also, we can work with resources. So if we want to target buckets directly, for example, we can say S3 underscore resource is equal to boto3 dot resource, and also S3 here. So these are the two things that we're going to be working with mainly. Now, what can we do, for example, to see all the buckets that we own? We can say something very simple like response is equal to S3 client dot list buckets. That is going to get us all the buckets. Now, in order to display them, let's iterate for buckets in response, and then in square brackets here with capital B buckets, print buckets. So we can run this. And you can see now I have name, neural 9 tutorial bucket, creation date, and the time zone. That's basically it. So that would be listing the buckets. Now, I also want to know in a bucket, what are the objects? So list the objects from a specific bucket. And for this, what I do is I say response is equal to S3 client dot list objects v2, version 2. And all I have to do here is provide the bucket name. So bucket is equal to, now in my case, this was neural 9 tutorial bucket, I think. Was this the name? Let me just double check. Yes, this was the correct bucket name. And now I can then say the objects are equal to response.get contents. And then here we're going to pass an empty list. Then I can just print objects as a whole, or I can also iterate. Let's run this. And what you can see is I have key file1.txt, key file2.txt, and then I have some stuff like last modified, time zone info, some tag, and some checksum that, or the checksum algorithm that is used, the size, and the storage class. The storage class is something we didn't talk about. Let's maybe briefly mention that because that's a quite important concept. Basically, you can choose what storage class an individual file has. For this, we can click on file1.txt, for example, and down here you can see storage class. And I can edit that. And the basic idea here is how often are you going to access your files, and depending on what kind of file this is, if this is a backup or a frequently used file, you're going to want to use a different tier. Now, the different tiers also have, or the different storage classes also have different pricing associated with them. So you can either choose one yourself, which we're not going to get into in this video today, or you can use something called intelligent tiering, where basically AWS is going to determine the most optimal structure intelligently, automatically for you, and do it in the most cost-efficient way. At least that's what they say. So this is just something to mention. Again, since we're doing a high-level tutorial here, I'm not going to cover this in more detail, but that is a concept that is definitely central to S3. So you can see the storage class here as well. So in this case, the storage class is standard. So next we're going to take a look at how to actually download files from a bucket. For this, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the output once again. And what I want to have is I want to have from the bucket, Neural 9 tutorial bucket, the file, let's say file1.txt. So that's the key of the file and the name of the bucket. These two things are going to be important now. So in order to download a file, quite simple, I just say s3 client.download file. And I have to provide, first of all, the bucket. So the bucket is going to be, again, Neural 9 tutorial bucket. Then I need to provide the key, so the name of the file, file1.txt. And I also need to provide the local file name. So what is going to be the destination where this is stored? So I'm going to say here file name is equal to, and I can say file1 downloaded underscore again.txt. And that is going to download the file1.txt file as file1 downloaded again.txt on my system from the Neural 9 tutorial bucket. So I can run this. It's going to end. Then I can leave NeoVim. I can list the files here, and you can see I have this file1 downloaded again.txt. Let's take a look at it. Hello world. There you go. So that is how you can do a simple download. Now, let us also enable versioning now. So let us actually go ahead and say, I want to enable versioning. Now, I showed you how you can do that, or did I show you how you can do that in the web interface? It's actually quite simple. You just go to the bucket, you go to properties, you go to versioning here, you go to edit, and you can just enable it. But we can also do that in code, and this is what I want to show you here. So we're actually going to do this in Python. Let's go back to the main PY. Let's comment this out. And what we're going to do now is we're going to say s3 client.put underscore bucket underscore versioning. Then I'm going to specify that the bucket I'm talking about here is equal to, guess what, Neural 9 tutorial bucket. And then I want to say versioning configuration is equal to a dictionary where the key status is going to point to the value enabled. And we're going to close that here. Actually, wrong bracket type. There you go. Neural 9 tutorial bucket, status enabled. That is going to enable versioning. So we can actually do that in the command line now. This is done. We can take a look again here at this page. Let's rerun it. You can see it's enabled now. So this already happened in the web user interface. And now what we can also do before we do that, before we learn how to do that in code, we can just upload the same file again. So I can go here, upload, add files, and I can just upload file1.txt again. Actually, before that, I should probably change the content. So let's go to file1.txt. Let's say hello world again. Save it. Now let's add the file, file1.txt. And upload. This is going to upload now a second version of that file to the S3 bucket. And we can take a look at the different file versions by iterating over them, or by, basically iterating over the versions. How are we going to do that? We're going to say response is equal to S3 client dot list object versions. And here we just need to do the same thing as before. We provide the bucket and the prefix of the file. So basically what the file starts with. In this case, it's just going to be the file name. So we're going to say bucket is equal to Neural 9 tutorial bucket, and then prefix is equal to file1.txt. And then I'm going to say for version in response version, or versions, plural, print the version. So I can run this, and you can see I get here two versions of the same file. I get this one here that has a last modified date of 17/28/2, and then I have one with 17/10/43. So that is 18 minutes later. This is the initial upload. This is the second upload. And now what I can use here is I can use the version ID to target this file. So I can say I'm interested in downloading this specific file, or I'm interested in downloading this. Where is it? This has a version ID of null. So basically I can either use the default or I can use this one. And we can actually do that now. I can actually download them as two separate files by saying s3 client.download file. And then I'm going to just say bucket is equal to neural 9 tutorial bucket. The key is equal to file1.txt. File name is going to be equal to downloaded file1 version1.txt. And I'm not sure if we should pass a version ID here. So what we're doing here in general is we say extra arguments is equal to a dictionary. Here we're going to pass the version ID. And let's run this again to see, before we do that, to get the version ID. So here, let's just copy this to the clipboard. Let's uncomment this again. Let's just paste it here. And that will download the one version. And I think the other one is either going to be downloaded by specifying no version ID at all, or by specifying null explicitly. So let's just run this and see what happens. So it downloaded both of them. Let's see what we get here. We get downloaded file1 version, and okay, that's 2 times the same version. So let's actually go and say version ID null. Or maybe the problem is that we didn't upload the file when versioning was enabled. So I will have to do it again, I think. No, I think, first of all, let me add a comma. Oh, there you go. Okay, so we can do that with version null, but I think if you enable versioning right away, you're going to get a version ID here as well. So you can see we downloaded Hello World, and we downloaded Hello World again by specifying explicitly here null. So that's also a possibility. This is how you can keep track of different versions. And of course, when you upload a file now in Python or in the web UI or in the command line interface, it's going to automatically create a new version if you use the same file name. So if I use Python here to upload another version of file1.txt, it's going to just add a version, not replace the file. So let's actually try exactly that. I'm going to comment this stuff out, and then I'm going to run the following line. I'm going to say s3 client.upload file, and we're going to provide the following. The file name is going to be equal to, and we're going to say file1.txt, which is, let's change that again. Let's say hello world again once more. Then I can say file1.txt. The bucket I want to target is again neural 9 tutorial bucket. And then the key, this is now different. The key is what the file is going to be called in S3. So I can use any file locally, but I want to upload it as file1.txt. So file1.txt. And then I want to say extra arguments is going to be equal to a dictionary, where I'm going to say content-type is going to be equal to text/plain. Of course, you can use something like application PDF if it's a PDF document, but this is a text file, so we use text plain. So let's run this. Sorry, I need to remove this hyphen here. Let's run it again. There you go. So now this uploaded a new version. If I now comment this out and run the code, you're going to see we get 3 different versions here for the same file. And we can also make this more obvious. I can also go ahead and say upload file1.txt. So basically the same file, but use a different key. Let's call this file3.txt. If we take a look at the web interface, if I go to my bucket, we only have file1, file2. And if I now run this, once it's done, I can refresh here and you're going to see we have a file3.txt here in our bucket. So this is how you upload files. Now, finally, the last thing that we need to cover is how do we get rid of files? How do we actually delete objects in buckets? Quite simple. We say s3 client.delete object. Then we specify again the bucket to be equal to neural 9 tutorial bucket. And then we just specify the key. For example, file3.txt. So we can also comment this out again. I can run this. There you go. And now if I reload the page here, you're going to see file3 is gone. Perfect. And of course, what we can also do is we can empty a bucket and we can delete the bucket. So what I can do is I can say the bucket is equal to the s3 resource. This is now the first time we use that, s3 resource dot bucket. And here we're going to provide the bucket name or identifier, neural 9 tutorial bucket. And then we just have to say bucket dot objects dot all dot delete. This is going to delete all the objects from the bucket. And then we're going to say s3 client.delete underscore bucket. And we say bucket is equal to neural 9 tutorial bucket. And now when I run this, I get an error. Oh, of course we get a problem because we're not deleting all the versions. We're just deleting the objects themselves. So what we need to do is we need to say for version in bucket.object versions all. This is of course only if you have versioning enabled. We need to say version.delete as well. Or actually, I'm not sure. Can we also do just, probably we can also do just bucket object versions all dot delete. That should also work. And now let's run this again. There you go. And we can take a look at that. The bucket is no longer here. So I can also go to my buckets and I don't have any bucket anymore. All right, so that's basically it. These are the basics. This is how you can upload, how you can download, how you can create and remove buckets here. Actually, we didn't cover the creation, so let me do that briefly. To create a bucket, what we do is we just say s3 client.create bucket, and we just have to specify a bucket name. So bucket is equal to some new neural 9 bucket. And I can then pass, for example, here, create bucket configuration is equal to, and then I can say location constraint, and I can force this to be in a specific region, for example, US 1. Then I can run this. Of course, I have to comment out all of this stuff and this stuff, but then we can run this. And now if we take a look at the web interface, you can see I have a new bucket here. So these are the basics. Now, finally, I also have a simple Flask example here, mainly written in ChatGPT. I'm going to be honest about that. And this is just a very, very simplistic example of how we would use S3 as part of a web application. Very, very minimalistic. Basic idea is simple Flask application with a secret key to allow for flash messages. We have a bucket name that we use here. Now this bucket needs to exist. So I'm going to change this actually now to my some new neural 9 bucket that we just created. We're going to define a temporary uploads directory, and then we have some basic routes. We just have an index route that is listing all the items here with the list objects v2 function. So that is essentially just showing the content of the bucket. Then we also have the upload file endpoint here. Here we use a different function, s3 client.upload file object. We provide a file, a bucket, a file name again, and the content type. The main difference between this function and the upload file function is that this function can handle binary file-like objects. So we can use something like file from the request. So we can use something like with open file as whatever in reading binary mode. Then you can use something like this, and upload file is when you have an actual file path that you want to specify. So here you can pass binary data, and in the other one you have to pass a file path. So that is that. And then we also have a download file endpoint and a delete file endpoint. And when I run this now, you can see once I get this into my browser, let's go full screen here. You can see that we have the simple S3 file storage demo, and I can go to browse now. I can navigate to this working directory. And here now I can, for example, choose file1.txt, upload. Now it's put into the bucket. I can see it here in my overview. I can do this with another file, and I can upload this as well. I can also download the file, so I can save them in the same directory here as downloaded.txt. And basically I can also delete the file. So all of this is happening using S3. So this is not just my local storage here. This is all in the cloud, in the AWS cloud. And we can actually see that that's the case. If I just go here now and I reload this, I click on the bucket, you can see that in this bucket, I have the file1.txt. If I go to my application again, upload other.txt, upload, there you go. I refresh, this is going to be in the bucket as well. So that would be a very minimalistic use case, but that is really just a starting point. This is the very, very first step when it comes to working with S3. You don't know anything about the service yet, but you know at least how to do some very, very basic stuff. So that is the entry point. If you want to see more videos like this one, where we don't go any further than just the very basics, so that you can watch this for a couple of minutes, maybe half an hour, and understand what the service is about, let me know in the comment section down below. I'm going to do this for other AWS services as well. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope you learned something. As I already said, if you want to see more of these AWS quick introduction videos, let me know in the comment section down below. Also, if you want to see more detailed courses, crash courses, tutorials on certain services like maybe S3 in detail, not just covering the very, very basics. If you want to see stuff like that, also let me know in the comment section down below. And if you want to see something completely different, also let me know in the comment section down below. And also, if you want to support the channel, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. Other than that, thank you much for watching, see you in the next video, and bye.